Alright, let's see if we can do a window regulator on the driver's side of this 2011 Expedition. First things first, we're going to disconnect the battery. It's an 8mm socket on a ratchet. Reason for disconnecting the battery is because there's an impact sensor and, well, we don't want the curtain to go off. Onto the door panel, we have a few screws, 7mm, and right there's a Phillips head. So let's remove the first 7mm screw. We're going to pop that off, fish that out of the door handle there. Probably would have been smart to grab an extension. We're just going to skip on through there. Alright, so now we're going to move our way into the door handle. There are two 7mm below this cover. Hook tool gets that up, and then we get the screws out. Just like that. On to using our hook tool to get the one Phillips head screw out of the door. Hand tight. Out it comes. Then you have two 7mm bolts at the bottom. So we're going to go ahead and remove those with our 1/4" ratchet. Now, when you pull this door panel, you have to pull it up and out. But first, you need to disconnect the window switch, the lock button, the tweeter, which you see towards the middle right of your screen, and you can see those hooks, so it has to come up and then out. So this window regulator is an entire assembly, so because of that, you're going to see that we're going to remove the speaker, but first we're going to go through and show off all the parts of the wire harness that we're disconnecting. Now you're going to remove the vapor barrier, which is going to expose the regulator assembly, the motor, and then a couple of our harnesses. Now the gray part towards the upper left, that is your impact sensor. This is reason why we remove the negative battery terminal, because if you hit that, you're going to set off at least the driver's side curtain. So that's me disconnecting it right there. Alright, now we're disconnecting the window motor. And then we're going to disconnect the harness and the two connectors going to the back of the speaker. And we're going to disconnect the mirror harness. Now is that really necessary? Most likely not. But it's better to disconnect wiring for stuff like this and not have to, instead of testing the tensile strength of these wires and then making our day a lot longer, getting in there with the clip tool, pulling the clip tool out. Alright, and then on to pulling the two speaker wires out, getting the harnesses separated. Getting everything out of the way. Making sure that we're not pinching harnesses on the way out. So getting in there with our panel tool. You can get a decent set of the panel removal tool at a place like Harbor Freight or Northern Tool. You don't have to get anything fancy. So we're going to go ahead and remove the impact sensor. The impact sensor will have to be transferred to the new door assembly. It is a T25 Torx for both bolts. So we're going to go ahead and remove that. Also, make sure that when you sit this down, you sit it in a safe place away from everything else. Make sure that nothing can hit it. Because again, we started this job without an airbag light. We'd like to finish this job without an airbag light. And I will tell you, these Torx screws are pretty long. Meanwhile, while I continue removing that, to the right side of the screen, you see that metal with the 2 black Torx screws. You're also going to be removing that, and we're going to be discussing that here shortly. But as you can see, we're going to go ahead and hold on to that impact sensor, remove the Torx. One recommendation I have for this job is, in most jobs that are screw and bolt intensive, is to make sure that you are putting them together in like a metal parts tray. Keep your bolts together. So now we have the impact sensor removed. And we're going to go ahead and remove the window motor. So the window motor has to be transferred to the regulator. So we're going to go ahead and remove the 3 Torx screws here. These are T30. And you see how long that these screws are. So before doing this job, do verify that the issue is the regulator and not the motor, because the new regulator assembly does not come with the motor. Now, like I said, I removed that metal piece and those 2 Torxes because you got to get that main part of the door harness away from there. There is the overview of the entire assembly. We're now going to begin by removing the 10mm bolts that hold this in place. So I'm going to go through and do that. You are going to have to remove the interior door handle. So as we continue getting those bolts out. Alright, so now, one thing I did not show is the 2 10mm bolts that hold the glass in. You will also need, suction cups are the best thing. That's what I would highly recommend, is those suction cups. But in this case, I didn't have them. The set that I had was worn out, so we did the masking tape method. If you're going to do the masking tape method, make sure you use a lot of it. If you think that you're just going to use 1 or 2 strips and that's going to hold the window in place, your window will slide down and it will break. And then, again, you're now probably going to the junkyard or ordering a replacement window. Assembly comes out. Here's a comparison of the old and new regulators. So the problem with these Expedition window regulators is moisture just gets in the door, even with the vapor barrier, and you can see that the cable right there unwinds and it starts crunching with the window going down. In this case, I got one final window up, and basically if I had put the window back down, it would have been stuck in the down position. Alright, so now we're putting the new assembly in. This one was just one from eBay. It was about $75. So now we put our 10mm bolts in. This is where service information usually tells you installation's reverse of disassembly. So here we go. Get my arm in the way. And we're just going to go ahead and make sure that everything is nice and tight. And now we're going to reinstall the window motor. Get those 3 screws in there, making sure that the gear for the window motor is contacting the regulator. Alright, so we got that back in there. We're starting to go ahead and reroute our wiring harness back into the door. So we're going to go ahead and plug our new window motor in, if I can figure out how to get it plugged in. Alright, and as you can see up in the upper right corner, I just plugged in the main harness again. We're going to go ahead and put our impact sensor in. So one thing that I will usually do when I do a window regulator is I will take the door apart, replace the regulator, and I'll put the door electronics back together as much as I can without getting completely everything buttoned in, to test and make sure that the regulator is working. And in this case, the regulator came with the window channels all the way at the bottom. So what I had to do is I'm actually going to have to plug everything in to get the channels up to the top so that we can go ahead and install the regulator to the glass. But first we're going to go ahead and make sure that our impact sensor is installed and tight. Make sure those 2 T25s are tight but not over tightened. And make sure that's properly seated. Get the electrical connector back on there. Make sure the lock is engaged. And then here you see that I'm actually in the process of, you can see it peeking in. There we go. Getting the channels to come up. So they also come completely tightened, these 10mm bolts. You could either A, loosen them. It'd be easier to loosen it without, outside the vehicle. But I went ahead and decided I want to do it the hard way today. So make sure that we get the 10mm bolts loose, so that way when it goes up the window, the channels will open and the glass will kind of slide into position. What you don't want is, you do not want if you kept that bolt tight on accident, you could shatter the glass, or and if you had it loose, your bolts could fall out and then your channels are in 2 pieces, and that is not fun either. So here we had the channel contacting the glass. I couldn't get a great angle, but you can see where the bolt is. Right there are the 2 holes to go ahead and tighten those in. Again, do not over tighten the channels. You do not want to break the glass. So now we got those tight. And there you see the masking tape method at work. Like I said, 1 or 2 don't. Now here's me removing the masking tape and testing to make sure that the window works. Making sure there's no abnormal noises, no binding of the window opening or closing. Here it is very smooth. And I'm going to test it, a few times just to make sure that the window goes up and down. Lost the video of putting the door panel back in, but that is it. We got it successful, quality job, and that is the video. Thank you.